I'll talk to you about a project we've been doing for the last sort of 3.5 years, which is where we've been working with 11 other, see if there's a different slide here, 11 other design centres around Europe in trying to influence policy. And the reason we try to, the reason influence policy and how the role that design's got in innovation policy. The reason we're doing that is because prior to that, we'd spent a lot of time trying to change how design support programs happened in a lot of these regions. And we realized after a lot of effort that nothing really changes unless you change policy, because policy drives strategy, strategy drives programs, and programs hopefully bring possibly funding or reconfigurations of funding and things happening on the ground. And we weren't finding that was happening. We were kind of running around changing what we were doing as design support programs, shouting at the civil servants saying we should be doing this, this and this, but it doesn't really happen unless you can get that political will to drive policy, which then potentially drives change. So that's why we were looking at policy. And then we were looking at innovation and how the role that design's got in innovation policy. And we chose innovation because if you look at the economic development strategy of pretty much every nation around the world, whether they're kind of leading edge nations or emerging economies, you'll find that in their economic development strategies, they've got the word innovation. It might not be on page 1, or it probably is if you're in Korea, but it will be there somewhere. Page 1 or page 10, innovation will be in there. But if you look for design, pretty much, quite often it's hard to find. And we as design organisations, we took the sort of lead that design's got this. We took the position that design's got this key role to play in realising innovation. It's not the total solution, but it's got a key role to play in realising what innovation is and how organisations, businesses, public sector organisations can be innovative on the ground and make things happen. And from a European perspective, this is from policy strategy from the European Commission. I'm standing back so you can see it. But from the European Commission, which came out about this time last year, which was looking at innovation on much broader terms. And for the first time, the European Commission was looking at innovation not just on taking a traditional route of looking at it as research and development or technology or fundamental materials research, etc., but on a broader basis, saying that innovation has got a role in public services, private sector services, and design's in there as well. For the first time, design was there properly as a priority. It was priority number 9, but it was there as a priority. So while we were running this project with these 11 design organisations around Europe, this was going on as well at the same time, and in the background they were being lobbied successfully by organisations such as BEDA, etc. Also at the same time, in order for the European Commission to understand what design was about, they launched this European Design Innovation Initiative, which had a leadership board. And I think Deborah's in the audience, she's on that board. And that is to inform the European Commission about what the best strategy is for expanding the use of design across Europe. This was earlier in the year as well, one of the final conference we had for the C project. This is Peter Droll. He's moved on a bit now, but he was at the time the head of the innovation policy for the DG Enterprise and Industry. And he was saying the European Commission's vision would be that by 2020, which is only 8 years away, design will be fully acknowledged, well-known, well-recognised element of innovation policy across Europe at European, national and regional level. I mean, that's a brilliant, fantastic statement and fantastically supportive. But if you read a little bit into that, it says, it wants to be fully acknowledged and well known, which is kind of admitting that it's not yet well known. So we've only got 8 years for that time scale to get people to buy into the message totally. I think in the UK, particularly people who work in the Design Council, we're kind of ahead of the game in that, but there's still a long way to go. And also, at a European, national and regional level, one of the messages I've got, find the side, but in starting from scratch, I don't think we're starting from scratch in the UK, but in starting from scratch, if you've got an idea and you want to make some change, it's a long process to do political lobbying, which then feeds into policy and then strategy and then something happening on the ground. That's a very long process, and that's what we found in these 11 regions across Europe. It's taken a long time. There's been some impact in all of them at the end of the project, but it is a long process. And also, you might not quite get what you expected at the start, because every region and nation will take a different interpretation about what design and innovation is, and they'll have to fit it into their own economic and social and etc. strategies, and will interpret differently. For example, yesterday I was talking to a couple of people who were trying to be in partnership within a project in Belgium and in Holland, in The Hague, and they put, we were looking at NEETs, young people not in employment, educational training, and how we can put a project around that related to design. And how they look at NEETs fits into completely different departments in those two different regions, into the two cities, is Brussels and The Hague. So the kind of program to do it across Europe has had to be tailored to kind of fit into their needs exactly. And the same will happen as design and innovation cascades from a European Commission level to a national level, to a regional level, and then maybe on a city and town level. So these, in understanding, I'll make sure I'm on time, in understanding the role that design's got in innovation policy, at the start of the project 3.5 years ago, these 11 regions got together and we mapped out, working both the design centre and the regional policymakers, dragging them along to workshops. We mapped out what the current status of those innovation policies were, what the scope of the innovation policy was, and whether or not design fitted into it, and what the scope of the design role was as well, as a kind of benchmark. And this is at the moment, this is just looking at what European member states have got some kind of policy vision for design in 2011. This is not necessarily having a distinct design policy, but you'll find the word design somewhere in a policy document in that country. It doesn't, and it will be, so it's not quite as good as it looks, but you know, it's there somewhere, creeping up the ladder. And you can see quite a lot is happening. And we mapped out the results of these, where design fits into innovation policies, into a kind of staircase model. You'll be familiar with the staircase model from the Danish design ladder version, where it kind of maps out progress for businesses as they sort of invest in and understand design, going from the bottom where there's absolutely no understanding of design, up to the top where it's a piece of fundamental strategy to do with the business. And we kind of mapped that across in relation to policy as well, trying to find out which regions and nations have got best practice. So going from nations and regions with no policy vision at all to ones which are using a more traditional route, so particularly on product development, industrial design, to ones which are starting to embrace service design in the private and public sector, and to ones which are totally embracing it. So, and those are limited really to sort of Denmark and Finland, who are the only countries in Europe who've got a distinct design policy. I guess the conclusions I wanted to say was that we're seeing a lot of change across Europe. The European Commission wants us to change. They've got two big asks of us. They want us to embrace a much broader definition of what innovation is. It's not just about R&D and technology. It's about innovation in public, private sector services as well, about social affairs, etc. They also want us to embrace the fact that design has got a key role in that innovation policy, in whatever department it falls in your region. It is complex when it hits the ground. And in recently talking to the European Commission, the policy advisors there for design, they don't know yet, which is the role of the European Design Innovation Initiative. They don't know yet how to cascade, how it's going to happen that the policy at the European Commission level is cascaded down onto the ground, and how the different regions and nations and cities in town are going to actually interpret what they do on the ground. But change can happen. I mean, with all of the 11 partners we had in the C project, at the end of the 3 years, there was some kind of significant change where design had been embraced within the innovation policy. A lot of them had started to embrace service innovation in relation to the public and the private sector services. And if you go to the website cproject.org, we recently, or just the other day, we put in a kind of summary document which gives you an outline about where the policy statements, where the statements about design fit into the policy statements in each of the member states. And you can have a look at that and look at the fuller results of the analysis between what was happening in 2009 and what's happening today.